The new ranked split is right around the corner with the 13.14 patch to go along with it, so let's provide you guys with an update to the tier list for every single role. We've got a pretty massive patch here with nerfs to notable meta champs like Jax, Hecarim, and Rek'Sai. Lots of item changes lined up as well, with Gale Force seeing a pretty massive nerf. Of course, Naafiri will be released this patch, but like always, we will be holding off on rating a brand new champion until our mid-patch tier list update, since it's impossible to rate new champs accurately before we see them on live servers. And just before we get started, if you want to improve fasting at the rank you've always wanted, then go to SkillCapped.com. Stop wasting your time grinding thousands of games only to see no progress. With SkillCapped, you'll uncover the secrets to climbing ranks fast that only take a few minutes to learn and can be immediately applied in your next game. The best part is, it's completely risk-free to try, as you're kept safe with our rank up insurance. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Get the rank you always wanted by clicking the link in the description below. Alright, now let's start off by having a look at all the item changes and which champions will be affected most. The scaling power of Axiom Arc is going to be increased this patch. Ultimate cooldown refund is being changed from 20% flat to 5% plus 40% of your total lethality. If we do some quick math here, with Ghostblade and Axiom Arc, you'll have 36 lethality. 40% of that is 14.4. This means you'll have 19.4% ultimate cooldown refund with 2 lethality items. So it's a tad weaker with just 2 lethality items, but from then on out, Axiom Arc will be stronger. Nothing game breaking, but a small buff nonetheless. Talon, Nocturne, and Kiana are 3 champs who can look to benefit from this buff the most. The second lethality item being buffed for this patch is Prowler's Claw. Lethality of the item is going up from 15 to 18. Kiana, Kha'Zix, and Talon are 3 champs who have been running Prowlers the most in recent patches, so they'll see a small uptick in power. A couple tank item buffs are on the way, with Randuin's Omen seeing its crit reduction increased from 20 to 25%. Very few champions actually build Randuin's right now, and it's super situational, so we don't see that changing as a result of this buff. A tank item buff that will be a little more impactful for certain champions is Spirit Visage. Magic resistance is being increased from 50 to 60. Mundo, Zac, Nasus, and Volibear are a few champs that will be liking this change the most. Spear of Shojin is going to be buffed, with its cost reduced from 3,400 to 3,300, and health on the item is going from 300 to 350. Hecarim and Jax are really the only 2 champions who have been building Shojin as a staple pickup in recent patches, so with both champs directly nerfed in 13.14, Riot's likely buffing Shojin to try and lessen the blow a little. A similar buff is being issued to Steric's Gauge, with its cost reduced from 3,100 to 3,000, and its health increased from 400 to 450. Illaoi will be the top lane champion liking this buff the most, while the item will feel a little better as a third pickup on a variety of bruisers. The only item nerfed this patch is going to be Gale Force, with its active cooldown being increased from 90 to 120 seconds. Pretty big hit here, especially for solo queue where everything is less coordinated and you can't play around cooldowns as well as in pro games. Jhin will take the biggest hit as a result of this nerf, and it will be really interesting to see if Infinity Edge sees an uptick in play now for 13.14. Speaking of Infinity Edge, let's take a look at its changes. AD on the item is going from 70 to 65. Crit damage, however, is being increased from 35 to 45%. Yasuo and Yone are 2 champs who will be liking this change the most, and it will be really interesting to track what builds pop up throughout the patch. With Gale Force nerfed and IE buffed, we should definitely be seeing a lot more builds incorporating Infinity Edge as a second purchase. We were definitely expecting to see some Trinity Force nerfs, but Riot is actually shifting the power of the item instead. Attack speed is slightly down from 35 to 33%. The threefold strike passive is being changed from increasing base AD by 4% over 5 stacks to 6% over 3 stacks. This means your upfront damage is going to be higher, however your extended fight power is being reduced. It's really going to depend on the champion and situation as to whether this is a buff or a nerf. If your support finds a catch on the enemy and you're looking to follow up with some quick bursts to finish them off, this is a nice buff in that case. If you're in a late game team fight where you are auto-attacking numerous times, then the change will be a nerf. All in all, we don't see the change removing Trinity Force from meta, and it should remain a great pickup. The 13.13 nerfs to Static Shiv removed it from being viable for the majority of AP champions besides LeBlanc, so Riot is back again with a second round of changes in 13.14. The passive damage is being lowered from 250 scaling to 450 to 250 scaling to 350. Whether this change ends up being impactful or not will solely depend on if it messes with the ability to one-shot the back minion wave. If it does, then Static on LeBlanc probably falls off, but if it doesn't, it will remain a great pickup. AD champs who build Static should not be affected all that much by the change, because they actually benefit way more from the base stats than the item provides, and not just the passive. One of the most impactful changes on the entire patch are the adjustments to Ghost. Movement speed duration is being increased from 10 to 14 seconds, however the duration extension on takedown is being removed. Basically a buff to the laning power of Ghost, but a hard nerf to its teamfight strength. For most ADCs, they've got solid alternative options to fall back on like heal or exhaust, so in the grand scheme of things, they should be just fine. It's a different story though for top lane champions like Darius and Olaf, who are extremely reliant on Ghost. Although the duration is going up from 10 to 14 seconds, how often would you actually need more than 10 seconds to all-in someone? With Darius at level 6 in a 1v1, the 10 seconds from Ghost was often plenty to chase the enemy down and secure kills. So the duration increase from 10 to 14 seconds likely doesn't affect Ghost's 1v1 power all that much, while the removal of the reset will drastically hurt your later game teamfight strength. We don't see this trade-off being a favorable one, and as a result, expect Darius and Olaf to see a decent hit to their power levels for 13.14. The final system adjustments for this patch are going to be the blue and red buff. Blue is seeing its ability haste lowered at level 1, staying the same at level 6 and increased from level 11 onwards. Mid lane mages will be the ones just flat out buffed the most by these changes, as they usually wouldn't be getting blue until level 11 onwards in most games anyways. The burn damage from red buff is going to be reduced, going from 10 scaling to 78 to 10 scaling to 75. Melee slow amount is down as well, from 10 scaling to 20% to 5 scaling to 20%. That 5% drop to rank 1 puts a small dent in melee junglers' gank power early on. With all the system changes out of the way, let's move on to breaking down all the direct champion changes. Aatrox is the only top laner buffed for 13.14, with his Q base damage going from 10 scaling to 90 to 10 scaling to 70. Q total AD ratio, however, is up from 60 scaling to 80% to 60 scaling to 100%. Riot has stated that once you have 101 total AD, this change ends up being a buff, so the scaling power of Aatrox is going up. Q minion damage is being buffed as well, going from 55% at all levels to 55% at level 1, 60 at level 6, 65 at level 11, and 70 at level 16. Definitely some pretty positive buffs here, and as a result, we will be moving Aatrox up the tier list from A into S. Top lane meta is going to be seeing a considerable shift this patch, as Jax is being hit with a nerf. E cooldown is being increased by 1 second at all ranks. R mana cost is going up from 50 to 100. Changes that aren't going to completely kill Jax by any means, but they will be enough to take away his OP tier status and will be dropping him into S. At the time I'm making this video, we don't have the exact details for this Yorick change, but we do know he's receiving some bug fixes for the way he interacts with lifesteal. Changes likely won't cause any drastic shift in power for Yorick, so we won't be moving him anywhere on the tier list for now, but if the changes are actually impactful, we'll be sure to update you guys in our mid-patch tier list. Lots of moving parts in the top lane tier list for the 13.14, so let's jump right into it. OP tier will now consist of Malphite and Fiora. Fiora has been a really solid pickup in recent patches, and now that many top lane champs are being hit with the ghost nerfs, she's going to rise in priority even more. Olaf and Darius are both being bumped from S into A tier, as we expect the ghost changes to negatively impact their solo queue viability. Top lane Rek'Sai is a pretty niche pick right now, but with the champion nerfed for jungle, it's going to impact her top lane power as well, and she'll be dropping into A tier. One other adjustment will consist of moving Illaoi from A into S tier. Illaoi's been on the verge of an S tier position in recent patches, so with Sterix being buffed, we see it being enough to move the needle and give her that push up. The highest priority top lane bans of the patch are Fiora, Illaoi, and Malphite. For our top 3 easy champs to climb low elo the fastest, we have Malphite, Mundo, and Garen. Diana has fallen completely off the map over the past while, so Riot will be issuing a few minor buffs. W shield is being increased by 5 at all ranks, while its AP ratio is up from 25 to 30%. W damage ratio is buffed as well, going from 15 to 18%. EAP ratio is seeing an increase from 50 to 60%. Considering how weak Diana is currently for solo queue, these buffs just don't seem like enough to push Diana back into meta, so we'll be leaving her in B tier. AP Shaco is heavily outperforming AD in solo queue, so Riot will be providing a few buffs to AD. Q bonus damage ratio is going from 50 to 60%. Backstab crit bonus is being increased from 40 to 55%. Shaco will be a good A tier pickup as a result of these changes for 13.14. Shyvana is receiving similar treatment as we saw for Shaco, with her AD builds being buffed. Q total AD ratio is going from 20 scaling to 80% to 20 scaling to 100%. The next 2 attacks after using Q will now grant 40 scaling to 60% increased attack speed. Cooldown on Q is going up by 1 second at all ranks. Max health mark damage on hit is being increased from 3% to 3% plus 1% per 100 bonus AD. Do we see a Trinity Force with Blade of the Ruined King build make a comeback for 13.14? Overall, the dueling power of Shyvana early on is up significantly due to that Q change, and her skirmish is going to be pretty nuts when building AD. With that said, Shiv has been a bottom-of-the-barrel jungler in recent patches, so we have to temper our expectations from these buffs, and we will be placing her in B tier for now. Another jungler who has been very fringe in recent patches will be buffed in 13.14, being Volibear. Passive AP ratio is going up from 40 to 50%. W missing health heal is up as well from 8 scaling to 16% to 8 scaling to 20%. Mid-game skirmish of Volley does become a bit stronger, but the changes really don't affect his early levels at all. With a Trinity Force build, Volibear isn't actually in as bad a spot as many players would think right now, so with these buffs, he's being placed in our jungle A tier. Really interesting that Riot has decided to go ahead with these direct nerfs to Hecarim while changing Ghost in the exact same patch. You'd think Riot would wait and see how the dust settles with the Ghost changes, but they're nerfing Hecarim W too. W resists are being lowered from 15 scaling to 35 to 10 scaling to 30. That 4-second increase on Ghost is actually much more impactful for a jungler than a top laner. The fact that you can pop Ghost a lot sooner to lead into a gank will help you reach skirmishes faster and still have your Ghost running for the fight. We do still expect the Ghost changes to be net negative overall due to the reset removal, so with that in mind, combined with Hex direct nerf, he will be dropping down into our jungle B tier. Riot has decided to revert the recent 13.13 Kindred nerfs and issue some different ones instead. This means health and armor are going back up, while Kindred Q cooldown is going to be increased by 1 second. Q base damage is dropping as well by 10 at all ranks. The fact Riot's reverting the 13.13 nerfs is a bit strange because you could argue Kindred needs these new nerfs on top of those old ones. We can't see Kindred losing very much power as a result of this approach, and Kindred will remain in our jungle S tier. A few nerfs to Rengar are on the way, with his base health regen going from 7 down to 6. Q crit conversion is being lowered from 95 to 75%, which, as you can see from the before and after clips, results in a decent damage drop off on Q. Rengar will be leaving the jungle S tier and will be moving down into A for 13.14. More Rek'Sai nerfs are being issued this patch, with her E damage changed from 55 scaling to 75 to 5 scaling to 25. The ratio has changed as well, from an 85% bonus AD ratio to a 70% total AD ratio. As you can see, it's about an 8 damage decrease at level 3. W damage is being hit as well, going from 55 scaling to 115 to 50 scaling to 110. Nothing overly impactful, but a chunk of early game power taken away for 13.14. As a result of these nerfs, Rek'Sai will be dropping from OP into S. So with all those jungle changes covered, let's have a look at the tier list. OP tier will be locked down by Kha'Zix, Ivern, and Jarvan. With Rek'Sai dropping into S, Ka is moving up and taking a spot. The best jungle bans of the patch include Evelynn, Kindred, and Graves. Our top 3 low elo selections are Rammus, Amumu, and Nocturne. Next up for mid lane, we have Lissandra, who will be receiving a massive amount of quality of life buffs. Passive will no longer stop at final frames before detonation. Passive will now follow enemies into brush if they were being chased. Passive thralls, however, will be revealed to enemies through Fog of War. Q is now going to slow all enemies hit rather than just the first. The Ice Shard missile casts from position post-cast rather than pre-cast. Our heal amount is being increased from 90 scaling to 190 to 100 scaling to 200. AP ratio is also up from 25 to 50%. A few other quality of life changes are being added to R as well. With so many of these changes being quality of life and not based on exact numbers, it's hard to get a super accurate read on how powerful Lissandra will be. Champ has been very close to breaking into S in previous patches, so we'll be giving her the bump for 13.14. Xerath is next in line for a bunch of buffs, and they're looking really nice. Base mana is going down from 459 to 400. Passive cooldown is increased from 12 to 16 seconds. Passive cooldown will now be reduced by 2 seconds on unit kill and proc on structures, so even though passive cooldown is up, if you're farming minions, this is a buff for laning. Support Xerath, on the other hand, will actually be nerfed quite hard by these alterations since he doesn't farm minions. Our changes are pretty spicy, as Riot will be increasing the number of charges from 3 scaling to 5 to 4 scaling to 6. Our damage is going down from 200 scaling to 300 to 180 scaling to 280. AP ratio drops from 45 to 40%. You will now deal bonus damage with each R hit being 20 scaling to 30 with a 5% AP ratio. So this R change will really reward the mastered Xerath players who are proficient in landing every R. For the average Xerath though, we could see the change landing as net negative, which isn't necessarily a bad thing as it gives the champ a higher skill ceiling. Where does Xerath land power-wise as a result of these changes? We expect Xerath to become marginally better, but not to the extent where he's a truly powerful S tier pick, so he'll remain in A for now. Just those 2 champion changes for mid lane this patch, so let's have a look at the complete tier list. OP tier is going to consist of Neeko, Talon, and Pantheon. Talon and Qiyana are 2 mids who are the biggest winners from the item changes, as they can both incorporate Prowlers or Axiom Arc into their builds. Kai'Sa mid is a pretty interesting pick right now that is even being pulled out in the pro scene. For solo Q specifically, and now that Static Shiv is being nerfed, the champ is nothing that special, but she should have been a bit higher up on the tier list before and will be placed in B tier. We're going to hold off on making any big moves for Yasuo and Yone until the mid-patch update, because with all the item changes, it's really difficult to accurately predict where they'll land. Definitely be looking to try try out some Infinity Edge builds though, as Gale Force is likely on the way out. Our top 3 mid lane bans of the patch are Zed, Nico, and Fizz. Malzahar, Aurelion Sol, and Annie are 3 of the most optimal low elo mid laners. There's not a single ADC who's receiving a direct buff or nerf this patch, so let's get right into their tier list. On top of the meta for yet another patch are going to be Misfortune and Ashe. One adjustment we'll be making due to the item alterations is moving Jhin from S into A tier. Jhin is much more reliant on Gale Force than most ADCs, so we expect him to be hit the hardest by the nerf. With Infinity Edge buffed and Gale Force nerfed, there are sure to be a plethora of new builds that emerge, so watch out for our updated builds video. Some of the best value ADC bans of the patch include Kai'Sa, Draven, and Ezreal. MF is without question the best low elo ADC, but Ashe and Twitch trail behind as solid options as well. Just a few changes to support this patch, kicking things off with Zyra. AoE spells damage to plants is being reduced from 4 to 3. Ranged auto damage to plants is up, however, from 4 to 5. W seeds on first rank up is going from 1 to 2. E will no longer lock out flash during the cast. R is seeing a few quality of life buffs as well. Nothing overly impactful here for Zyra, but enough to give her a push up the tier list, going from A into S. A few more nerfs to Emilio are penciled in, with his passive burn damage going from 25 scaling to 80 to 15 scaling to 50. E movement speed is dropping from 15 scaling to 25% to 12 scaling to 20%. Some pretty decent nerfs here, especially to the scaling damage on Emilio's passive. Champ has been in a really good spot for a while now, but that should come to an end for 13.14 as we'll be moving him from A into B tier. We got another round of Rel nerfs with Riot targeting her armor and passive. Armor is being reduced from 39 to 36. Passive resist steal is going from 3 down to 2%. This means the max value drops from 15 to 10%. When we factor in just how powerful Rel has been in recent patches, will these nerfs actually push her out of the meta? We don't expect so. At the very most, we can see her dropping into S, but for now, we'll be leaving her up in the OP tier. The tier list for support is not going to be changing a whole lot for 13.14. Rel will no longer be the standalone OP pick due to her nerfs, so we'll be moving up Janna and Blitz alongside her. As we noted when going over the Xerath changes earlier in the video, they're actually pretty big nerfs to support Xerath. Less base mana and a higher cooldown on passive will make his poke threat in lane way less powerful. The compensation buff where Xerath's passive cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds on unit takedown will not help support Xer since he does not farm minions. Our change is going to be pretty power neutral as well for the average player, so we will be moving support Xerath from S into B tier. Best support bans of the patch are going to be Nautilus, Blitzcrank, and Rel. Heimerdinger, Zyra, and Rel are 3 of the most powerful supports for low elo. So that's going to be all for the 13.14 tier list update, but if you want to improve fast to get the rank you've always wanted, then go to SkillCapped.com. With premium courses for every role and skill taught by the best players, SkillCapped is the perfect platform to help take your game to the next level. Take our wave control course. While you wait for your next game to start, you can learn freezing, fast pushing, slow pushing, bouncing waves, the list goes on, all in just a few minutes to maximize your improvement rate. Or maybe you just like seeing your opponent's health go to 0. Then you'll love our trading course. We even have a skill test at the end so you can see how good you really are. Players just like you are leaving 5-star reviews and raving at how helpful they are. That's not all we offer though, as every week we release 10 brand new Smurf commentaries where a challenger player teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank you're stuck in. If you're looking for something more personal instead, then we got you covered with one-on-one coaching from our trained challenger experts. All that seemed too good to be true? Well, don't worry, we're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you've always wanted. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Good luck in solo queue, and we'll see you in the next one.